Hi everyone, I'm Teacher Lisa, your ESL video instructor. Today we're going to continue in the book English for Everyone, chapters 49 and 50. This is where we stopped for those that took lessons with me on Take Lessons. But going forward, I'm doing each lesson as a video lesson. So we do have some already on this YouTube channel. You can go back and check those videos out. Any chapters that I missed, I will go back and post those videos as we go along. But for now, we're going to continue where we stopped on chapter 49. Don't worry, you don't have to do the chapters in order. So it's okay. Each lesson stands alone. Just pause the video as we do the exercises. Try to understand each vocabulary word or grammar point or phrase that we focus on. And if you do this, you have a pretty good comprehensive grasp on some of the topics that you need to improve your spoken English. So let's go inside, jump on my computer, and continue. And one more thing, if you have any questions, just go ahead and leave it in the comments. I'll answer the questions to the best of my ability. Really about anything English related. If you have a question, always feel free to leave your question in the comments. Thank you. Okay, so here we are, chapters 49, modal verbs in the future. So we're just going to read the introduction together. And again, if you want a copy of this, you have to purchase it through the publisher directly or through Amazon. I'll put the link in the description, but I'm going to share screen. So modal verbs, what are they? So I'm going to read starting from here. Some modal verbs change form when used to talk about the future. Others cannot be used in the future at all and have to be placed with other modal verbs or phrases. So we're going to look at the new language. Will be able to, will have to. We do have some vocabulary in the lesson about legal terms, and the new skill, expressing future ability and obligation. So that's what we're going to cover in this chapter. So let's look at the key language so you understand what we are talking about. Can. So let's look at the word can in the future. Okay, so let's look at the first example. At the moment, I can play the trombone quite well. Let's look at the next example. If I work harder, I will be able to play at concerts. You have to know there is no such thing as will can. That is incorrect. You cannot say or write will can. So please take note of that. We also have an interesting side note here. I'll read it. It is not grammatically possible to talk about the future using can. So what do we have to do? We have to use will be able to is what we use. So you notice that in the example here, we never say will can. We say will be able to. I will be able to play at concerts. Let's look at the negative. So the negative is formed with not able to or unable to. So either one, whichever one you prefer is okay. Not able to or unable to. Let's look at our two examples. Unfortunately, I can't read music very well. Next example, if I don't learn, I won't be able to join the orchestra. So you can also use will be unable to, but it is less common. So here, usually you'll hear a native say, I won't be able to. Again, we often like to say I won't be able to. You typically will not hear us say will be unable to. But it is grammatically correct. It's just not the common way to express this idea. Okay, let's move forward. Remember, we're not going to do every single exercise in the chapters as we go, but we'll try to do the ones that illustrate the point quite nicely. So let's move forward. Okay, let's look at our next point, must and have to in the future tense. So let's look at our first example here. In some countries, people must or have to recycle. It's the law. In the future, I think everyone will have to recycle. So here we also have a note. It says will, must is incorrect. So you cannot combine will and must together. You have to say will have to if you're talking about the future. So we have the note here reminding us there is no future form of must. No future form of must. So we had our example of must recycle. How do you make the future for must? You don't say will must. No, you have to say will have to. The negative form is formed by adding not between will and have. So what does that look like? We have our example here. How do we create the negative? One day, I hope I will not have to work so hard. Will not and then have to. Okay, let's move on. In our next exercise, we're not going to do it as a listening, but we'll read together, and I want you to put in the blank what you think fits best. So here are your choices looking down below. You have to choose from permits, banned, break, observe, enforce, passed, and arrested. So these are all legal terms. The first one is done for us. First of all, this is a situation. A radio show is reporting on a new law concerning farmers' land. So here you can pause the video if you'd like and try to see if you can do the exercise on your own, and then come back, unpause the video, and see if you got 100%. So let's do it together. The first one is done for us. A new law has just been passed by the government, so we use passed. Okay, so let's look at the next sentence. This new law blank members of the public to walk on farmers' land. Which word do you think goes in the blank? All right, so if you said permits, you would be correct. So I'll just type in each answer here. Permits, great. So we're going to cross off permits, so we've used permits. Let's look at the next one. Walkers will have to blank reasonable rules set by the land owners. What do you think goes in that blank? Observe. So let's go ahead and put in observe. We're going to cross that one off. Okay, next one. If they blank these rules, they could be blank from walking in the area, or they could even be blank. Okay, so we have to put in 3 words there. Again, if you need time, pause the video. So for the first blank, if they break these rules, so we're going to put in break. If they break these rules, they could be banned. So we'll type that in here, banned, which is not permitted. They could be banned from walking in the area, or they could even be arrested. You don't want that, so you could be arrested. Okay, so let's continue on. Let's cross off the words we've used, and we're going to do the most difficult one. If you've been in my classes before, you always know the last one is the most difficult one. Some farmers, however, think that the police will not be able to enforce the law. Okay, so go ahead and see how you did. And what you want to do, if any of these words are new, you can check the direct translation in your native language. Be sure that you understand all of these words. These are common words that we use when talking about legal things or government. So it's good to know all of these words. Okay, let's clear the board and continue on. Okay, next exercise, we actually have a crossword puzzle. If you enjoy doing crossword puzzles, you'll like this exercise. So we have these terms in a crossword puzzle. Remember, we do these exercises to force the brain, to remind the brain that these words are important. So if you never do any exercises with new words, it's very easy to lose that word in your mind. So when you do these exercises, it helps you remember. It helps you work with the word. We call that activation. So this is the technique. It's always good to do some form of exercise with the word, whether it's putting it in your own sentence or doing an exercise or a game or a puzzle. Okay, let's go. We have the first one that's done for us. Number 1, 2, we have 6 of them. And of course, we have to make sure the spacing is correct. So the first one that goes in the first space, to make a new rule, to make a new law or rule official, it's pass, right? You pass a law or this rule has been passed. So we have pass in number 1. Let's go to number 2, to follow a rule or law. So which one is to follow? And again, you can pause the video and try it on your own. And so we're going to 2 across. So we have to make sure we have enough space. So here we are, 2 across. And the answer is observe. Observe. So we'll go ahead and bear with me. We're just going to freehand this into our blanks to observe. All right, great. Let's go to number 3. To not follow a rule or law. Not follow a rule or law. So break. So that means you're going to break that law. So we'll put in our letters here. Break. Okay. Let's go to number 4. To make sure a rule or law is obeyed. So you look at number 4, 4 down. Which one would fit? So we see we have an O and an E that could help us, but it is enforce. So let's go ahead and put in enforce. Right. Again, when you work with these words, it's easier to remember them in the future. Let's go to number 5, to stop someone and take them to a police station. That is to arrest them. So let's go. E, good. Our S fits nicely, so arrest. Okay. And number 6, to allow something to happen. And so do you think the last one will fit? Yes, it does. We have that E there and 6 down, so P-E-R. All right, permit. So hopefully you got 100%. Okay, let's clear the board and move on. So we have our checklist for 49, and what we did, we were able to review will, be able to, and will have to. Okay, we looked at some legal terms that we just even saw in the last exercise: enforce, pass, break, arrest, permit, observe. Okay, and expressing future possibility and obligation. So you can always go back and review this section in the video. So let's move on now to chapter 50. Modal verbs overview. So this is actually a review of some of the chapters we did in the past. Again, don't worry if this is your first time watching this video or you're not sure what modal verbs are. We're just going to review all of the modal verbs, the common modal verbs that we use in everyday English. Well, what are they? So let's go ahead and look here at our introduction. I'll read that. Modal verbs are used to talk about likelihood, ability, permission, and obligation, among other things. They often refer to hypothetical situations. So a hypothetical, they're situations that are not real. So fantasy or imagination. So let's look at what those modal verbs are. And they're often even called helping verbs. It's not the main verb often in the sentence, but it helps with understanding the sentence. So our new language, using modal verbs, our vocabulary is modal verbs, and our new skill, asking, offering, and predicting. So that's what they're used for. Modal verbs are used to ask, to offer, and predict. So let's look at our key language. Modal verbs share certain characteristics. They don't change form depending on the subject. They're always followed by an infinitive, and their question and negative forms are made without do. So let's break this down. There was a lot that was said here. So they don't change form depending on the subject. So as you know, we always make sure the verb we use agrees with the subject. In this case, although we're calling them verbs, modal verbs, we don't need to change the form. So for example, can or could or should or must, it doesn't change form. So that's good. That's good news. We don't have to worry about changing form. They're followed by an infinitive. So what is infinitive? It just means we don't change the form of the verb. We just leave it alone also. We'll see that in the examples here. So you also don't have to worry about that. And then we ask questions, we don't need the do. So when we have questions, we don't use the do. So let's look at some great examples here and different modal verbs. So, and why they're used. So the first one is logical deductions, logical deductions. So what is a deduction? It's basically a guess because of the different clues that we have. We can gain understanding of a situation without somebody telling us directly. So that's called a deduction, logical deduction. So here are some great examples. Using can, could, might, may, should, and must. It can't be Jane because she's on vacation. It could, or it might, or it may be Dave. I don't know. It should be my dad. He said he'd call me. It must be Tom since everyone else, since nobody else ever calls. So that's if the phone rings, you can make these deductions. Okay. Obligation. Okay. Again, we have the pictures to help us with the situation. You must arrive on time for work. So if your boss tells you that, it's an obligation. He's not giving you a choice. So when you use must, make sure that you're trying to convey the idea that it's an obligation or give the idea that it's an obligation. Permission. We have a picture here, 2 people with a cake. You can have more cake if you want. You may take as much as you like. We're giving permission, can and may. Ability. I can speak 3 languages. I can't read Latin because it's too difficult. I couldn't study it when I was at school. Okay, you notice here, I'll use this last example to talk about the infinitive. Remember we said you have the modal verbs, can, can't, couldn't in this case. And then we have the verb or the main verb. We have speak, read, study. Do you notice it's not in any form, future form or past tense or any kind of tense? We leave the verb alone, it's infinitive form. So it's just speak, read, and study. So that is the case with any verb that follows the modal verb. We keep it in its infinitive form. So that will help you with some of the structure or grammar of the sentence. Okay, let's clear the board and move on. All right, we've got 3 more here. Requests, advice, and suggestions and offers. So we use can and could for requests. Can or could you give me a ride home later? Would you email James for me, please? Will you lock up the office tonight? So these are all requests. You notice we do not have the verb do. We don't use do when we make requests using these modal verbs can, could, would, and will. When we give advice and suggestions, you should ought to go to the doctor. You could try the new medicine. Ought is a little more formal. You don't hear that as often, but should and could. So be careful with these because when you overuse these modal verbs like should and could, sometimes people get irritated because it could be just strong suggestion of advice. Should, could. Sometimes people, especially if they didn't ask you for advice, you have to be careful about overusing this. You should do this, you should do that, you could do this, you ought to do that. It could make the person feel like you're giving them unwarranted advice or advice they didn't ask for, or you're being pushy or telling them what to do. So just be careful with some of these modal verbs. Make sure that we're using the right ones and for the right reason. And offers, can I help you with those? Shall I carry some of your bags? So that's a nice polite way. Shall is also more formal. You don't use that with friends, so it's pretty formal. The same with ought to. So stick with should or could or can. All right, let's clear the board, move forward. Okay, here we have the next exercise. You can go ahead and pause the video if you'd like. You have to choose from the selection below. Can't, can, must, should, may, would, and ought. The first one is done for us. The rules say that you must finish before 5 p.m. Okay, great. Must. There's no other choice. We are making this an obligation. So we used must for the example. Let's go ahead and look at the next 6. I appreciate that it's difficult, but I think you blank talk to him about it. Should would work here. We'll go ahead and type in the answers. Yeah, and you can see that that's a suggestion. Number 2. Finally, after months of studying, I blank read music. I can read music. So you have the ability. So we'll put can there. Number 3. I'm sorry, but I'm terribly busy at the moment. Mr. Jones, blank, tomorrow be okay? Would tomorrow be okay? Okay, so again, we're just giving this offer, asking if this is all right. Would tomorrow be okay? Number 4. I follow the recipe so it blank to taste great, but sometimes it doesn't. It ought to taste great. Yeah, it's similar to should. Remember, we said ought is just a little bit more formal. We can even use should in if we had to, we can even use should here. Yeah, it should taste great. But we have the 2, so we have to say ought to taste great. If it can't be should with the 2, should to taste great, no. But because we have the 2, ought to works well. Because some students might say, could I put should here? Yeah, you could if we didn't have the 2. And we've also used should already. So let's go to number 5. I've tried really hard, but I just blank make these figures add up. I just can't make these figures add up. And number 6. Okay. I'm feeling very unwell. I'm feeling very unwell. May I be excused? Right? I'm feeling sick. May I be excused? Okay. And that's asking permission. May is also very polite and formal. May I be excused? We sometimes might say, can I be excused? But may is better because it's really asking permission. But you might hear a native say, can I be excused? May is probably the best way. Great. How did you do? 100%? Okay, let's clear the board and move on to the next. Okay, here we've given you some choices. You have to cross out the incorrect one in each sentence. Before you drive a car on your own, you must take a test. Okay, so because it's obligatory, you have an obligation. So we cross off the other 2 in the example. Can you do it? Which one fits best? Again, if you're not sure which one we use, go back to the video, in the beginning of the video, where we explain how to use each one. You had those examples. We really want to try to get 100% here. Okay, so pause the video, see how you do. Okay, so let's look at the first one here. Number 1. It's very hot in there. Would you open a window, please? Number 2. This coffee has sugar in it. It must be yours. I don't know when the movie will finish. It might not be until after 10 p.m. Okay, so I'll circle the correct answer here so it's clear. Number 4. Shall I help you carry those dishes to the kitchen? Number 5. My lawnmower has broken. Could I borrow yours, please? And the last one, I can't swim very well at all, but my sister is an excellent swimmer. Okay, let's move forward. Let's do one more exercise. I'll clear the board and let's move forward. Okay, our last exercise in chapter 50, we'll do this as a listening. You can follow along if you'd like, or you can just turn your head away and listen to me read, and then see if you can answer the question. So that's how you can do it as a listening, or you can follow along. So it's called Student Surprises. What surprises exchange students when they stay with British families? Okay, so what surprises these exchange students when they stay with these host families? What surprises them? We're going to read. We do have an example. You have some questions to answer, whether it's true or false, according to the reading, according to what you heard. Little cultural differences often shock students the most, and that's true, according to the reading. So let's go ahead and read together, and then we'll come back to the 4 questions. So I'm going to start reading. Okay, here we go. Please listen carefully. More often than not, it's the small cultural differences that shock students the most when they stay with British families. Some students, for example, are surprised that houses have curtains rather than shutters. Other students say they are shocked by the amount of potatoes that British people eat. One student once said to me, "Tonight it could be mashed, it might be fried, or it may even be boiled, but whatever it is, it will be potatoes." The British love of pets can also surprise students, and the fact that pets can sleep inside the house or even in bedrooms can be shocking for some. In many cultures, animals must stay outside. So perhaps wherever you're from, you can relate to this. Some countries, it's true, pets stay outside. Others, it's inside. In the American culture, pets often stay inside the home. Potatoes are often used more in the American culture, for example, than rice. Rice is used quite frequently in Asian cultures, for example, or some Latin countries. You know, rice and beans is common. So it's very interesting, the small differences that shock us. Okay, let's go. True or false? Some students are surprised that British houses have shutters. Are they surprised? Okay. False. Number 2, some students think British people eat a lot of potatoes. True. One student said that he ate mashed potatoes every night with his host family. False. And number 4, in the UK, most animals must stay outside at night. False. So you have to be careful when you're answering these questions that you're just sticking to what is in the passage. So for example, number 3, one student said that he ate mashed potatoes every night with his host family. Mashed potatoes. He said he did, but what did he say? What did the text say? He said, yeah, sometimes it is mashed, but it could be fried, could be boiled. So that's really false because that's not what he said. Okay, so if you got any of these wrong, go back and check the text. Is that what it said, or do we have to make an inference or infer based on what it said? Okay, very good. Let's clear the board. Our checklist. So using modal verbs, we talked about that. We reviewed them. We use them to ask, offer, and predict. Okay, great. So we're making some fine progress here. So this is all of the language uses that we did so far in units 47 to 50. And again, don't worry if you missed any of the units. We'll go back and fill in, but go back and at least watch the first few, and we're just going to continue on in the book. And the next lesson, 51, is vocabulary review. So we're going to start to look at the vocabulary related to customs and culture, and we'll look through all of the examples. See you in the next video. Please remember to subscribe and give the video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. This is a free English training that you're getting here based on this book. So I appreciate the support. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.